In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make this 17-inch micro snake whip. Now with my micro snake whip design, there are several different variations. Today I'll be showing you how to do this one. It's an 8-plat overlay with a 2-point fall hitch and a 3-pass 5x4 Turks head knot. Now throughout the video I'll be showing you different variations and methods you can use to make this whip. So I hope you enjoy it. Now for the materials for this micro whip, of course you're going to need paracord. I'm using 550 paracord, and you'll need at least 25 feet of it. If you haven't made very many whips before, I'd recommend you go with 30 feet at least to be on the safe side, to give you some room for error. But anyways, then you'll need, of course, a tape measure, cutting tools, knife, scissors, whatever. The matches or a lighter. You'll need some BBs, and in order for them to fit inside the 550 paracord, these are 4.5 millimeter. It's the most common type you'll find. And then you'll need some sort of leather or something similar. It doesn't have to be very thick. This is just cut from an old belt, and you don't need very much of it. This is probably just about an inch wide and a couple inches long. And then you'll need some artificial sinew, and you can find this online. Then you'll need, well, this is optional, this is nylon thread, and this is only going to be used for making the cracker at the end of the whip, which you can use these inner strands of the paracord for that. So you know, you don't have to worry about getting that, but I make a lot of crackers for all my whips and selling and so forth, so I keep a big spool of this on hand. Now for some of these other tools, like a fork for example, you really don't need these. You can find other ways around it, but you'll see what I use this fork for later. It does make the job easier. And of course, just have some other things on hand, like needle nose pliers. I have this little pick here, or like if you have a fid. This is probably the most optional thing. You really don't need this, but it's just a way I like to, a method I like for attaching a cracker. And if you have a pair of hemostats, again, these aren't necessary, but they make the job easier. And you'll need some sort of clamp or vise, something to hold the whip. If you're getting into whip making, this should probably be the first thing you invest any money in. And then lastly, you'll need some sort of little nails. These are just a set of brads I found laying around. Just need very thin nails to put into the whip later. So I think that's everything, so let's go ahead and start working on the core. Now for the core, you're gonna cut out a 16-inch piece of your paracord, and you're gonna pull the inner strands out of it. And you'll be doing that for pretty much any time we cut out paracord, unless I say otherwise. So if I forget to mention that, just keep in mind that most of the time we'll be gutting our paracord. So anyway, now what we're going to do is we're going to shot load it. So basically, we're going to want about a third, anywhere between a third to a fourth of the length of the whip filled with BBs, just to give it that extra weight. So I'm going to do about, I think maybe the first 6 inches of this. So we're gonna basically just tie this off here, and I'm gonna do that with the artificial sinew, and I'll move it over to the vise and we can zoom up on that and make it easier to see. So I have the point where I want the BBs to stop in my vise, so go ahead and get your artificial sinew, and we're just gonna bind this off as tight as we can, so that way the BBs won't fall out. So I'm actually gonna cut a length of this, just enough to wrap it and bind. Alright, so once you've wrapped a few times like that, and have a couple of millimeters wrapped around, then you'll take the other end and just tie a couple of knots to hold it in place. The nice thing about artificial sinew is that it's waxed, so the knots grip pretty tight. So we'll go ahead and trim that off. So at this point, we're ready to begin shot loading this portion of the core. Alright, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of open up this end of the paracord here, and I'm going to singe the end of it just slightly so that it doesn't fray any more than it has to. So open it up just a little like that, and just touch the ends a little bit so it doesn't fray like crazy. So now we're going to use the fork. I'm just going to put it in the vise. Alright, so go ahead and take your first BB, put it in, and you can run it through in your fingers like this, but it's a lot faster with the fork and less wear on your hands. And some types of paracord, different colors, whatever, are just a little tighter than others, so sometimes it's harder with BBs to run them through, but just going to slide it in the tongs of the fork all the way and just pull it through like that. So we're just going to do this until we have maybe half an inch, quarter of an inch left at the top. And you can try and see how many BBs you can slide at once, depending on the paracord. So now that we've shot loaded this portion of the whip, make sure you left about half an inch or so of no BBs there. So now we're going to melt the end so the BBs don't fall out. And take the flame over the last BB just to kind of melt that down a little bit so that BB stays sealed off there, because we want this half inch just to be the paracord itself for putting in the vise for starting the braiding. So this core is now done, so we're ready to braid on the first belly. Now for the first belly, you're going to need to cut 3 strands of paracord. You'll need 2 pieces that are each 20 inches long, and you'll need 1 11-inch piece. And you'll go ahead and gut those. So we just have the shell of the paracord. So for the 2 longest strands, we're going to find the exact middle of them. Hold on to that. And then for this 11-inch piece, we're going to find the middle but then stagger it about an inch or 2. But we won't worry about that just yet. Now we're going to take the core, put it in the vise with this little tab we have of just paracord just before the BBs. Alright, so go ahead and take the middles of these two strands and we're going to cross them over like an X. So the two middles are right here. And we're going to put that over our core. Try to put it near the top, but don't worry about getting it all the way up just yet. So I have mine to where the strand that's on top is running up to the right. So we're going to take this one that's on top and we're going to wrap it around to the left and bring it out between these two strands here and bring it across. And then we'll go to the left side, take the top left strand pointing to the upper left, around the back, and between these two strands here. And this is a basic herringbone plait. This is a 4-plait. Now we're going to take this strand and add it in. We could have added it in at the very beginning, but it's a little bit easier to get this started. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this top right strand and slide it up some and create a loop here like that, and just run this strand through it. And once you get it through, go ahead and pull that back down tight. So this 11-inch strand, like I said before, we're going to find the middle. Just pull it so the middle gets there. So once you've done that, then as I said, we're going to stagger it. So pull one side a little more than the other, so you have one half about an inch longer than the other. Alright, so we have something like this. So now we'll just lay it along with the other strands. And now we'll be in a 6-plait. So to do that, you can see here we have this bottom left strand on top pointing to the upper right. So we'll take this topmost strand, which is the one we just added, go around the back and go under 2 over 1. And then now we'll go up, because this is pointing up to the upper left side, so we'll take this top left strand, which is still the same strand, go around the back, under 2 strands, over 1 strand. So at this point, go ahead and scoot this up to the top as far as you can, and pull each individual strand good and tight. So we're just going to continue this pattern until we start to run out of one of our strands. So I'll take, this is pointing, the bottom strand on top is pointing to the upper right. So I'll take this, go around the back, under 2 over 1. So just continue this pattern until your shortest strand starts to run out. Okay, so as you can see, I have just a little over an inch of this left, and I'm only about 2 inches from the beginning, so we're going to go ahead and drop this strand. So as you can see, I just pulled it through, so go ahead and take the other strand and braid just as you normally would, and do that until the strand we're going to drop is on top. On the top, and in this case it'll be on the top right side. Now if you had your strand staggered differently, your shortest strand may be on the left side. That's okay, you'll just have it on the top left side. So now I'm at the point where I would bring this around and braid it, but instead I'm just going to ignore it and get the next strand below it, go around under 2/1. So now we only have 2 strands on this side. So we are now in a 5 plait. So I'll take the top left strand, go around, and just do under 1/1. And now this is the next shortest strand. Since we dropped this one, this is actually technically the same strand, but we're going to drop this one now, so we'll be in an even 4 plait. So do the same thing, just braid down until that strand gets left on top. Alright, so this strand is now on the top left, so we're going to get the one below it, go around under 1/1, and now we're in a 4 plait. So we'll just continue under 1/1 for a couple of more inches. And make sure as you're braiding, when you pull the strand through, give it a good tight pull. You don't want your braiding to be loose. So we're going to stop just before where I bound off the BBs with all 4 of the strands left over. So I'm going to stop right here. Zoom out a little. Alright, so you can see here, this is where I bound off the BBs. The first BB is right here. So what I'm going to do is just get, you can use artificial sinew or electrical tape. I prefer hockey tape, sports tape, athletic tape, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much the same thing. I'd recommend that you use this over electrical tape. It's just better to use for whip making. Now, a lot of people think electrical tape is bad to use in whips, which, if you're using it for any flexible parts of the whip, then that is bad. But it's okay to use it like on the handle or something that's stiff, because it won't be moving, so it won't rub and deteriorate and all that. So now for this part, it doesn't matter if you use it, because we're actually going to be taking it off. This is just to temporarily hold. So I'm just going to wrap just above the top strand. You don't have to wrap very tight, just enough to hold it until we come to this point on the next belly of this whip. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stagger these strands, so that'll allow a better taper for the whip. So find your shortest strand and cut it about 1 millimeter away from where you taped, and try to cut your strands at an angle. So the next shortest strand, and we'll leave the longest one as it is. In fact, I'm gonna just cut the edge off of it so it's pointed a little bit. So as you can see, we have the shortest strand here, next shortest, and then this one, and then the longest here. So that'll encourage more of a taper in the whip. So we didn't braid very much, just about 4 or 5 inches of this belly, but again, this is only going to be about a 15-inch whip. So what we'll go ahead and do now is give these two strands a good pull and cut it as close as you can. So there's just barely even a millimeter sticking out, and just melt those in. Just kind of touch it and press it in. You don't need to do it very much. Alright, so now we're just going to give this a quick roll. So just grab some sort of board, something stiff, and we're just going to put some weight on it and roll it so it's nice and smooth. And besides making it smooth, what rolling does for a whip is it flattens the strands, of course, and so that actually fills in gaps. So if you're braiding and you notice some little gaps, it pushes it down flat, so that covers up those gaps, and of course the whip is more rounded, and it greatly improves the overall look and performance of any whip. Alright, so just rolled it like that. So now we'll go ahead and cut the strands for the overlay. Alright, so for the overlay of this whip, you'll need to cut two 64-inch strands, one 31-inch strand, and one 20-inch strand. And you'll cut them and gut them, and like we did at the beginning, we're going to find the exact middle of the two 64-inch strands. And this time, since we have an extra strand, or two actually, for starting out, go ahead and tie knots in the middle. You can pull them as tight as you want. We're not going to need to worry about untying them. So I'll do the same with this one. And then with the two other strands, you'll find the middle and then stagger it about an inch or two, and then tie knots at that point. So like for this 20-inch, take both ends, stagger it, and then I'll tie a knot here. And do the same with the 31-inch. So we'll go ahead and put this in the vise. And I'm just going to do the very end of the paracord. So I actually have about a millimeter of the paracord sticking out of the vise. So go ahead and grab any two strands, it doesn't matter what order. Take two of them like this, put it around the back of the whip. Take the two left strands, cross them down over, and the strands on the right, cross them over like that. So you have this. And make sure that the strands aren't overlapping like that. Make sure they're on top of each other. And just going to create a little gap here by pushing these up. And you're going to feed your other two strands down in like that. Make sure they don't go between and come out the individual strands of paracord. So once you do that, you can close it up and pull these until the knots stop in the middle, and throw these two on the other side. So you should have 4 strands on each side, so that makes an 8-plat. And make sure the knots of these two strands here are lined up in the back. push that all the way to the top. So now to start the 8 plat, we're going to take this top strand. It's easy to get confused with the strands that are inserted because they can easily twist and lay on top of each other, so make sure you establish which is the top, because you'll need to know that when you come to the other side. So this is the top strand, so I'm going to bring it around the back and go under 2 over 2. And then I'll go to the left side, take the top strand, which should be connected to that same strand I just pulled, go around the back, under 2 over 2. So we'll just continue this pattern until we drop the first strand, which, since this is the overlay, we'll be dropping strands a bit differently. So you really want to make sure that once you've gotten this started, that it's slid up as far as it can go. And once you've pulled each individual strand and braided it, so since this is an 8 plat, once I've braided 8 individual strands, then I'm going to go through each one and pull it as tight as it can. Because if you pull really tight before you braid a strand, you can pull the middle away from the top and it'll slide through, and you want to keep the middle of your strand where it is. So should just have one more pass. Okay, so I've taken each strand through once, so now make sure it's slid all the way up, and then individually tighten each strand. You want it to be good and tight. Alright, so now that I've done that, I'm just going to continue in 8 plat until I come to the next strand to drop. So here at this point, I'm just above this part where the tape is, and as you can see, this strand is about 2.5 to 3 inches long. So I'm going to drop it. So I pulled it under once and then did another pass on the left side, so it's secured underneath a strand. So I'm going to take another strand, go around, and to drop this strand, basically we're going to pull it underneath and bring it into as part of the core. So now we'll go under 2 over 1. And then back on the right side, of course, we'll continue under 2 over 2 for a little longer. So make sure whenever you pull the drop strand over that you don't pull too hard, or where it originally was here, you'll pull it out of place and it'll leave a gap there. So you want to leave it just as it is, like that. And at this point I'm going to go ahead and cut it. I think I'll take about half the length off of it so that it ends just before these other strands start to drop off. Now once you get right above the tape, you can go ahead and unwrap it. So this is what the hemostats are good for. I'm just going to give this one pass real quick. So you can clip them on like that, and you don't have to worry about your braiding coming loose. So once we take this tape off, the strands underneath are going to be, they're going to want to come unbraided. That's fine if they come unbraided some. So just let them as they are. And at this point I'm going to go ahead and drop this strand here, running out of it. And you don't ever want to be in an uneven plait for very long, because having a different amount of strands on each side makes the weave different on each side, and it's unbalanced, and overall it's not very good for the whip. So you want to drop the strands more like in pairs. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore that and bring it to the core. And I'm only going to cut a little bit off. I'm just going to cut it so that it's somewhere between the lengths of these tapered strands. So it's going to be like another one of these strands that's tapered. So now we'll be in an even 6 plait, and it may be difficult for you to braid over a bunch of loose strands like this. So what you can do is keep one hand around the core like this with your thumb in the middle, and just use the other hand to braid. A lot of leather whip makers do that because they're braiding over loose strands all the time. I prefer just to do it this way. The strands in the core don't really confuse me. So I'll continue in a 6 plait and come back when we're ready to drop the next strand. Alright, so at this point I am at about 7 inches. 7 inches down the whip, and you can see I have 2 strands from the previous belly that are to be dropped, and I'm going to getting ready to drop these strands and go into a 4 plait. So I'm going to drop the shorter one first, and there's just barely any length of it, as you can see. So I want to make sure we pull very tight. So now that it's between these 2 strands, when I bring this strand around, I'm going to pull it down, ignore it, and go under 1 over 1, just like that. So I'm going to pull it a little bit, not too much, because again it'll pull out of place in the braiding itself. And then this strand I just dropped and the strand from the previous belly are the same length right now, so I'm going to cut the one from the previous belly. So we have more taper. And as you can see here now, this strand is ready to be dropped. So I'll pull it around to the left. And on any whip, going from a 6-plait down to a 4-plait can be one of the messiest looking transitions. It's kind of difficult to get to look good. So really take your time on this part, pulling the strands right, and you know, just do your best to make it look smooth and avoid any gaps. It's especially harder on a micro whip. So now just bring this down to the core, go under 1/1, and I'll just cut a little angle on it. I don't want to take any length off because this is, besides the core, it's our last strand of anything to braid over. So just check all the way around, and you want to frequently check the back of your whip. Make sure the plating looks good as well. So we'll continue this 4-plait for a few inches, and then we'll cut out the core, braid over nothing, and then I'm going to do a tapered twist, because with a normal whip, if you end it braiding, then you have to, the lowest you can go is a 4-plait, end it on a 4-point fall hitch, whereas if you end in a tapered twist, you can go down to a 2-point fall hitch. So that encourages even more taper. Make sure you get any kinks and twists out of your strand. I just had a pretty bad one there, but I think I got it. So I'll braid down a couple more inches and pick up there. Alright, so at this point on the whip, I am at about 11 inches. So at this point, we're going to cut the core. So we're going to be braiding a 4-plait over no core. And this is pretty much the only plait you can do over no core. If you do any more, which would be a 6-plait or more over no core, it's so many strands that it kind of gets boxy. You can't get it really round. So anyways, if your core strand minus like fraying out just a little in the plating, that's okay. We can just lightly singe that down. Now if you have a whole chunk of cord sticking out, then you need to go back, unbraid a little and go back over it. But anyway, so here you'll have a choice as to what to do. If you want to end this in a 4-point fall hitch, just continue braiding this to 15 inches and you'll do a standard fall hitch, which if you don't know how to do, I have a 3-part tutorial on making a 4-foot bullwhip, and just go to the last part and go to the part where I believe it's in the 3rd part, if not the 2nd part, where towards the end of the whip I'm in a 4-plat, and I show you how to do the fall hitch. So I'm basically at this point on the whip. So if you want to do a 4-point, go ahead over to that. But for a micro whip, I don't really recommend that. I recommend that you do a tapered twist, which this may end up a couple of inches over 15. That's okay. You know, if it ends up even 20 inches, that's fine, because we want this whip to crack. And if we just started twisting now and only went to 15 inches, that would be too short, too fast. At this point, we're going to do the twist. So there's 2 ways you can do this. I didn't mention this because you really don't have to do it this way, but if you have a microcord needle, you can get these from Jig Pro Shop. I highly recommend you get one of these for whip making. They're great for making falls and tying knots. It's made for microcord, but it fits 550 cord. You just kind of have to cut a really sharp point on your paracord, which I'll go ahead and do, but if you don't, that's fine. We'll basically just, what we're going to do is we're going to drop off a 4-plat into a 3-plat. And to do that, we're going to do like we did in the first belly, just leave a strand behind and ignore it. And we'll singe it later. And what I've done, you take your strand, I just did a pass where I brought the strand around the back and over to the left, so it's pointing to the upper right. So if we were to continue braiding, we would take the top right and bring it around, but instead we're going to leave that behind. So if you don't have a needle, then you're just going to leave it behind and take this strand that you just passed over, and you're going to twist it to the right. And grab the other 2 strands, which would be one on the right side and one on the left, and pull them over to one side. So you have 1 strand here, 2 strands here, and you're going to twist all the strands. You're going to twist these 2 as 1 strand. You're going to twist both strands clockwise, good and tight, and then you'll wrap them over counterclockwise to the left, like that. Alright, so you'll just do that again, and we'll just continue doing this. Make sure they're well twisted, and then cross over. And you want to keep this real tight. After you cross over, pull it up. You want these to be twisted individually and then wrapped. You want both of those to be very tight. So you'll just do that, and then at the end of the whip, after we finish the twist, we'll actually end up dropping 1 more strand just like this. So once we get a couple inches farther down, if you're doing this, just go down about 3 or 4 inches, and then one of the strands in this, where you have 2 strands, just drop it and ignore it. And then just continue twisting these 2 strands. So whenever you twist, this is roughly what it'll look like. You'll have these 2 strands and then the twist continuing on to the end of your whip. So then you'll just cut those and singe them in like we did in the first belly. But the way that I like to do it, get this over. So I'm coming out of a 4-plat, lace up the top right cord, and we're going to lace it down in this strand right below it, right here at the top, and you're just going to follow the strand, just run it inside about the length of the needle. Once the whole needle is in there, then poke it out of the cord and start to pull it out. try to get this one more in frame. So you'll actually pull this cord through, and once it's all the way through, if it's twisted, try to untwist it. Just straighten it out, smooth it out like this, so it's the same length, and then pull just maybe another inch out and cut it, so that way whenever we pull out all the slack, the cord is hidden inside. Now there's going to be a tiny hole from your needle. That's okay. It's not very noticeable once you smooth it out and we twist it. So now we have 3 pieces of cord. So you have this one that was fed in, and then this one that's coming out of it. That'll be on the left side, and you'll take these other 2 strands, the one underneath. Alright, so then we'll twist each of them to the right. And make sure you pull this tight, especially at this point. And wrap it around. And then we can just do our twist as I just showed you before. And yeah, you know, this might take you a few times to practice to get used to it, to doing a tapered twist, to get it to look neat. But they're really not that hard to get down. So at this point, you want to have about 3 inches of the twist. So now I'm going to take my hemostats and try to clip it. So now the 2 strands that are together, I'm going to do the same thing again with my needle. And I already went ahead and singed this one. Just going to poke it through. And I'll do about the length of the needle. Just keeps poking through the other side. There we go. So poke it out right about here. Just pull it all the way through. And I'm going to scrunch this up as far as possible and cut off the slack a little more than last time. And with needles, sometimes you'll get little pieces of paracord that fray out. That's fine, we can lightly singe that later. So now we're just going to twist 2 strands. And we'll do that for 3 or 4 inches. And then we'll do the 2-point fall hitch. Okay, so I'm at the end of the whip here. You can see I just have a little bit of the strand left. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and make our fall. So I want the fall to be about 13 inches long. I found that to work best for a whip of this length. So if you don't have a lacing needle, then just get a piece of cord that's going to be an inch longer than the length you need. So this will be a 13-inch fall. Get a 14, maybe 14.5-inch piece, and you'll leave the gut in, and you're gonna just tie a simple knot. Just loop it over like that, and then pull it through so you have sort of a slip knot. So you'll try to work the knot to where you pull this in as close as it can, and then you can just cut that and singe it in, and then you have the rest of your fall here, and you'll singe the other end also. So I'm just gonna find the halfway point, and I'm gonna stick the needle into the paracord just like we did for the tapered twist. And just follow all the way through to the end. So I'm just gonna keep scooching it along. So once we have this pulled all the way through, you're going to leave a little eye there, just a millimeter or two wide, then run the slack out of the rest of it. Unscrew your lacing needle first. So run all the slack out and make sure that the fall is 13 inches and cut it. So now we have the paracord doubled up. There's 2 layers of paracord, and we're just going to melt that together. Alright, so once you have your fall, just let this cool. It just takes a minute or so, and then we'll attach it to the whip. So to finish this off, I have this clipped in here, and just gonna slide your fall up on top. You can open up this eye because we have this singe, so you can open it up as wide as you need to get over it. So slide it up onto the thong, and you can close it up, and just kind of push this up a ways. So I'm gonna unclip these, and to do a 2-point fall hitch, you're gonna take the strand on the left and take it around the fall and poke it through like that, and then you're gonna do the same on the other side. So take the right strand, go around behind the fall and out through. So now just pull your fall down, and you can tighten these strands up. Just give them a good tug. And now all we have to do is take these strands around the back and bring them down under the fall. So if you don't have a lacing needle, you can do this. It just might take some work with needle nose pliers and you know, a fid or whatever. So I'm gonna go ahead and use a lacing needle. Now these are too short to actually lace up onto the needle and feed it through, so I'm gonna have to put the needle through first and then screw it on. You actually end up having to do this a lot in whip making, and you'll see how that's done here in a minute. And I'm actually going to use my bigger lacing needle because I don't want to spend much time working the paracord into the needle itself. So I'm going to take the one on the left, bring it around, and screw it into the needle. Just twist the needle a few times and pull it down through. Just barely made it. So I'll do the same with the other strand. I'll go ahead and poke the needle under the fall, just like that. Bring this cord around the back and put it in the needle, give it a couple of twists. Oh. Try this again. There we go. So this seems a little bulky right now, but just tighten everything up, pull the fall, pull your strands, and then you can go ahead and cut them to you know, 1/2 inch or so. I'm just going to leave about that much sticking out, and I'll go ahead and singe the ends. So now the thong of the whip is just about done. We're just going to give it a quick roll. Alright, so before you go to roll the overlay, make sure that whatever you're rolling on is nice and clean, because stuff gets stuck down in the braiding pretty easily. So just grab your board and I'm just going to roll it all the way down the whip. And sometimes, depending on what surface you're on, boards won't roll as well. So I'm going to use this one. I coated this with Plasti Dip, so that gives it a good grip for rolling. And this will really help the whip look a lot nicer. And in some spots you might just have to tap it. Now for the end of this, where the knots are, where we started the braiding, we're going to cut this off. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the vise. Now you don't want to do this, you don't want to clamp down on it very tight. So you're going to get your artificial sinew, or even electrical tape if you have it. Preferably use artificial sinew, if not hockey tape. Then if not, you know, if you have any type of thread, something to bind this off. So I'm gonna try to zoom in a little bit here. And just bind this off to the knots as close as you can. And you want to wrap this as tight as possible. So I've given it a few wraps, and I'm going to cut it and just tie it off. Give it one half hitch knot. That'll be enough to hold it. Okay, so you want to have something that looks like this. If I can get this to focus. So just like that. You can see how that constricted it. So now we're just going to get a knife and cut off right above the binding. Alright, so once you've cut the end of your whip off, you may have cut into some BBs. That's normal. If it gets in the way of cutting, you can just, pop it out. And so once you've done that, then we're just going to melt the end. So I'm just going to light this up. It burns hotter, so it's easier to do that. And then you're just going to press it flat against something. So alright, so that's how you want it to look. So now we'll go ahead and put the knot foundation on. Alright, so for this heel knot, I have my leather, and I've cut it about 5/8 of an inch wide. And you're just gonna, to get the right length, just wrap it around and see how tight that comes to. I've cut mine a little bit short, and I didn't have a whole piece long enough, so I cut another piece to fill in that gap. And I just wrapped it on with some tape for now. But anyway, you're gonna want it to wrap around just about like that. So anyway, once you've done that, then you can go ahead and tape it on temporarily. So I'm actually gonna need to cut this tape in half, because otherwise it'll be too wide. So this is just gonna hold it on temporarily. Like I said, we're going to put some nails into it. So something else I want to mention too. This, you can see how thin this is. It's just like 1 millimeter wide. If you don't have any leather, then you can just wrap tape or artificial sinew. You can build up with artificial sinew to just wrap it around a bunch of times to build up a knot foundation. You could try it with tape, but like electrical tape maybe. It wouldn't be a very high quality whip, but it'll work. So this is kind of what we're aiming for. We just do anything to build this up to put the heel knot on. So now we're going to take these brads, and we're gonna take one off, and I'm going to cut it. So what you want to do is see how long you need it till it gets to the middle where it would be stopped by a BB. So I need it about that long. So I'm just going to cut this pretty much in half, so that'll actually give me 4. So I'll get my cutters here. and 4 is the number of these that you'll need for this. So to put these in, you're going to take your pliers and put it in the tip, grab it by the tip just like that, and take your whip and press it in just like that. That one bent. And you'll just kind of go up a little higher, push it in more once or twice, and then you should be able to just squeeze it in like that, just so it gets flush with the rest of this. So you want to do at least 4, top, bottom, left, and right. So just do that all the way around. Okay, so I have my nails in, and I'm just gonna give it another wrap of this other piece of tape just to kind of cover everything up so it doesn't interfere with our lacing needle. And just make sure that none of the nails are sticking out. You might need to squeeze some of them 1 or 2 more times. So now we're ready to tie the heel knot, which is going to be a 5x4 Turk's head knot. Alright, so at this point we're ready to put the heel knot onto our whip. And in this case I'm going to be doing the simplest type of knot to learn, which is a 5x4 Turk's head knot. So to start this, you're going to need a lacing needle. Now if you don't have one, what you can do is, first I'm going to cut a slight angle on the cord, and you can just singe the end of your paracord. Oh, had that upside down. And just singe it over and over again, melt it, let it cool, and do that back and forth, and eventually it will harden. So then you'll have a stiff piece of paracord which you can use to run through the knot, and that's what I did for a long time until I finally got a lacing needle. So and also with this knot on this small whip, it is easier to do without a lacing needle. Or if you can get some kind of piece of wire or metal to slide into the cord and then melt the end, and that'll stiffen it as well. So I've cut a 3-foot piece of gutted parachute cord for this knot. So once you have your needle or whatever you're using for a substitute prepared,